Hey folks, on this chapter of Soft Plastics 101, last week we looked at high tide flathead, this week we're looking at low tide flathead. So we've got a little bit of low tide, we're going to shoot to a few different spots quickly and just give you a quick rundown on the type of structure and look at ways to fish that structure effectively. So in this instance here, we're lined ourselves up along a typical low tide bank. So this is a channel edge. In the systems that you fish, it could be a sandy channel edge where sandbanks are dropping off, could be a weedy edge. We've got a bit of a mixed bank here. So you pretty much just got to choose your plastics and jig heads to suit the depth of water and how much flow there is. So if we've got a slow tapering bank, then we might fish a 1/8, 1/6, 1/4 ounce head to fish down that slow tapering bank. In this case here, our bank drops off fairly steeply at low tide. So we're going to mix it up between 1/4 ounce and 3/8 ounce head with some slim swims and some Z-Man minnows as well as those slim swims. So they're favourites for me when chasing flathead, those paddle tail plastics. In your system, if you've got a sandy edge, you don't have to worry about fouling in the weed and that sort of thing, so you can cast your plastic even right up on the sand if you want to and work that plastic in off that sandy edge. When it's a weedy edge, sometimes you just got to feel it out a bit. So if you can see a defined weed edge with your sunnies on, then perfect, work that weed edge. If you can't see the weed edge, just throw your cast in there and you'll probably catch the weed the first few times. And then you can just bring your cast out a little bit until you sort of define where that weed edge is. And you want to be landing right on the edge of that weed because that's where the flathead will be hanging. So these edge bites, you can drift back along the bank and fish it, or you can use your electric to push up into the current. And we're trying to cast sort of across the current and back if we're holding on the electric. If you're drifting with the tide, I often cast just ahead of the drift. And that way, by the time you've hopped the plastic back to the boat, it's almost in line with you. So cast it out, hop it back and just cast ahead of the drift, depending on how quick you're drifting, but you'll soon get a feel for it. And the main thing is you want to make sure that plastic is hitting the bottom because that's where the flathead are laying and in ambush ready to eat that lure. So we'll just have a bit of a flick along this channel edge, then we're going to shoot up and show you some other different types of structure for targeting flatties. So rod and reel wise, when you're chasing flathead, you don't need the flashiest gear in the world, just a nice quality graphite rod so that you've got a bit of feel. In this case, I'm just running the Akuma Seros range of rods. They're affordable and they're quality rods and they feel good. Around that 2 to 4 kilo is good for flatties, up to around sort of 3 to 6 kilos for your 3/8 ounce and heavier type of heads. Reel wise, a sort of 20 or 30 size, so 2,000 to 3,000 sort of size reel is a good starting point. Braid wise, I'll generally fish 6, 8, 10 pound braid with a 10 or 12 pound leader because flathead have got those raspy mouths so they can bite you off. And as we said, well, there's a little bit of movement in there. As we said with the, in terms of the pluckies, paddle tails or curl tails are a great starting point, but flathead, not super fussy, but sometimes you do want to mix your colours up a bit until you find what works on the day. Colour wise, I'll generally carry, as I've mentioned in the past when we looked at that segment on colour, I'll generally carry a clear natural sort of colour, a darker, more silhouette colour, that clear natural colour for the clear water and bright days, darker, more silhouette colour for the dirty water in those darker days, and then I'll carry a fluoro as well just to mix it up if they're not wanting to eat that. But the main thing today is we want to just give you a quick breakdown on a few banks. So there you go, that's a standard edge, whether it be sand or whether it be weed, and sort of how to fish that edge. The main thing is, some of you will go to an edge and you'll have awesome success, you'll catch a few fish. You go back there next time, you might catch none. So the main thing is cover ground until you find the fish on the day. Because I've had sessions where we've caught 80 flathead along a bank, go there the next weekend, no flathead on that bank. So you just got to find them and then just keep covering ground, keep working those edges until you get a couple. Oh, right in shallow there. So there we go, we found our flatty on this edge. Didn't take too many casts. And that one was sitting right where you'd expect him to sit. So we're right in tight on the edge. And he was up in amongst these little sort of fingers that poke out. So he was hiding in a break in the current, sitting in a sandy pocket in amongst the weed. Oh, I'll slide the net into him. A lot of people lose the fish at the net. Hopefully we don't do that today, but a lot of people will chase the fish with the net and they're chasing the fish around and around and around. You're better off just sitting the net in the water and just slide the fish into the net. And then we go. There's our flatty off a channel edge. Whether it's a sand edge or a weed edge, just get that plastic right in close to the edge, make sure you're on the bottom, hop it out from that edge. Couple of hops and a pause, make sure you're back on the bottom. Couple of hops and a pause again, and that guy has scoffed. That was on the little 2.5-inch slim swims. As I came in closer to the edge there and I was picking those pockets, I changed. I had the 3/8 head with a 3-inch minnows on, first up, and I was working wider of the edge, and then as I moved in and I was hitting those real tight little sandy pockets and stuff, I changed it up to a 1/4 ounce with a 2.5-inch slimmy. Whoa, and there you go. A shake of the head, and he's rasped off my leader there. So that's why you want to just play them nice and gentle, get that net in the water, slide them into the net. Come on, buddy, you behave. I've got to watch those spikes. Spikes either side of the head there, and also the spike on his back there. So with those 2 sets of fins, as I've said in the past, I normally grab them in between those 2 sets of fins, and that allows me a solid point to hold the fish so that I can get it back in the water. So there you go, that's our drop off channel edge bite. Let's nick off up further and see if we can find some other structure and talk you through fishing that. Cheers. Alright, we've moved from our channel edge that we were fishing and we've come into a typical creek mouth. So creek mouths are a great place to target flathead on the low tide. You can sneak around and target the edges, target the pockets, the drains, and all the different areas that you find in those creeks. So where we are here, we've just come into the creek mouth. There's a nice drain coming out of here. There's bait flicking in the drain. There's birds feeding in the drain. So there's a lot of life in this area. So definitely worth fishing in here. So we're not fishing so much those straight off, drop off channels into the main run. We're working up along the weed edges. We're working up along the sand points. We're looking for depressions in the bottom where it's a little bit deeper. And we're basically picking our way up this creek and we're hitting all the areas that look good. Again, we're looking for those current lines where a current rips around a point, causes that eddy. The fish will be sitting in that eddy as well. But a lot of the time it's, yeah, find the bait and find the fish. So if there's bait flicking in the shallows, there's probably stuff harassing it, be it brim, flathead, other species as well. We'll start off just flicking around in here with a 1/4 ounce 1/0 with a 2.5-inch slim swims, good small bait profile. And in these creeks, I also like to fish a 1/4 ounce with a 3-inch minnows. But for those that like the 2.5-inch grubs, 3.5-inch grubs, also awesome presentations. And for those of you that like to fish a bit slower, a bit more finessey, 1/8 and 1/6 heads are also a good option. If you do come across a lot of weed in some of these areas, because a lot of it will be weed flats draining into creek, if you do hit some really weedy patches, it's a good idea you can still switch across to those weedless rigs as well, those snake locks heads, and that allows you to prospect all through that weed and pick the flatties out of there. So I'm just making a cast up current. The tide's still running out, so it's running out of this creek. So I can just drift out. If I want, I can go up the creek and drift out and hit the edges, hit those drains and things. Otherwise here, I've just spot locked on the electric and I can just shuffle my way up jog my way up the creek on the electric motor and just work that soft plastic back with the current. So those flatties are laying on the bottom, boom, fish on. Fish on, feels all right too. Whoa. We left our weedy gutter. I don't know whether this one's a trev or a flatfish. I think it's probably a trev. Oh, it's a grunter. We left our weedy drain that we were working. So those weedy drains are definitely worth hitting. Just because we didn't get fish in there today doesn't mean it's not worth persisting in. Those blind drains where the water just drains out off a big flat are definitely worth a go. This area that we're fishing here, there's a whole bunch of drains running out off a big flat. Fair bit more water moves through here, a lot bigger drain. We're chasing flatfish, but don't mind catching a grunter, that's for sure. So we're just rolling those 3-inch minnows. There's a lot of run, so I've got a 3/8 head on because you can see the water's pumping out of here. So 3/8 head with a 3-inch minnow is a nice big profile. And I'm basically just punching that up into the current. So we're using the electric to hold in the current. If you don't have an electric, you can start at the other end of the gutter and just drift back down. Throwing that 3-inch minnows on a 3/8 ounce head. That's a fair handful of grunter, beautiful looking fish. Not our flathead, but same sort of area. They're up on the edge here. We're just working our way along this edge nice and slow and picking away at it. So weed beds either sides of us, more weed beds around here, and it all drains out through these drains. So by working our way slowly up in these drains or drifting our way back out of these drains, we can target flathead, likely bycatch, grunter, trevally, all sorts of other species as well. Oh, sorry buddy. Pretty hardy fish, that grunter. All right, I'll put him back in the water before I knock him around. He's keen, he's away, beautiful. So there you go, that's, in this case here, the water's pretty murky with these big dropping tides, so with the murky water, I'm going a nice bright colour. I've got that darker silhouette colour and I've got that chartreuse belly, so that's sexy penny colour, which is good in that dirty water especially. All right, see if we can get a flatfish. All right, that one doesn't feel like a flat brown one, but you never know, might be a nice one. Feels more like a trev or something. I'll just rocket us out of here a little bit. It's actually a nice pinky, eh? You just never know what you'll find in these big drains. I came in here after a flatfish and I might have got myself a snapper for dinner. How's that? Beautiful fish lit up in the water there. Right, oh, settle down buddy, settle down buddy, settle down. Might just spot lock us there so we stay in position. So there you go, that was picking the edge for a flatty, but because the tidal movement's coming in here, so the tide's pushing in, the bait's pushing into this big drain. And Pinky was pushing in here as well, looking for a feed. So he was only in, a metre and a half of water. Nailed that 3-inch minnows. Just some of the bycatch that you'll come across while you're targeting flathead, working those edges, working those drains. Pretty pumped, not a flatty, but you know, anyone's happy landing a snapper, that's for sure. So there you go folks, there's a quick breakdown on low tide flathead. We ducked out for the last couple of hours of the run out and the first of the run in. We've hit 3 different spots and just talked you through a bit about the locations that we're fishing and how we're fishing them. Picked up a flatty in those first 2 locations, came to our big drain, we didn't get our flatty, but we did pick up a nice mixed bag of other species, which isn't a bad thing anyway. But if you do use those techniques and those lures that we were using in this location, it is a great place to target flathead. So there you go, hit that low tide structure, look for those weed beds, those drop-offs, those drains, and spend a bit of time fishing them. Low tide is probably the easiest time to catch a flatty. It's my favourite time to catch a flatty. Get out there and hunt those edges and drains for that last couple hours of the run out, first hour of the run in, get amongst them.